What's going on, everybody? My name is Aiden, and welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Weekly. Now, this week, ladies and gentlemen, we will look at the previous week that the Bulls had. We're going to include that last game against the Knicks because, unfortunately, I didn't mention that in last week's Bulls Weekly, and I had a day where I forgot to make a video, and the Knicks played that game that day. We did lose that one, and unfortunately, in order to make things a little bit more fair, we're going to add the previous week's results, including that last Knicks game, discuss my player of the week, defensive player of the week, six man of the week, all the awards that we need to give, and look forward to what the week ahead is going to be. And I'll tell you now, it's a week that is going to give us the best tests we can ask for. It's going to be difficult game after difficult game after difficult game. And the Bulls have already had some very tough challenges already. If we can survive this week, if we can walk out of it with a neutral or a positive record, I think so many more people are going to start believing in the Bulls. It's not just going to be Bulls fans anymore. It's going to be NBA fans. I'm talking all across the globe. I'm talking all across the NBA. I'm talking about rival fans. I'm talking about Western Conference fans. I'm talking about European fans. I'm talking about everybody. That's how important this week could be to establish some faith in this organization for the first time in a long time, outside of just the Bulls fans. I think Bulls fans are really starting to believe we could get everybody believing if we just have a solid week upcoming. That's how important this week could be. We're going to have to figure it out. I don't want to put all the pressure on the Chicago Bulls because if we have a bad week, it's still not the end of the world. But let's figure it out and let's talk about it in this video. Before we get any further, if you liked the video and you want to see more from me, drop a like, drop a follow, and or subscribe if you are new. And let me know what you guys think about the Chicago Bulls, their previous week and the upcoming week ahead. So including that last game against the Knicks, we had 4 games to look forward to, and we ended up going 3-1. Unfortunately, we did suffer our first loss of the season, but it did take quite a while to get there. We were the last team in the East to lose a game, so that is very exciting considering there's every other team in the East did lose games. And we were the last team to do it. I think that's a nice stat to have. And of course, we got to 5-0, the first time in our history since 1997, something along those lines. So again, there's a lot to be happy about in that regard. With that being said, our first game was against the Atlanta Hawks, and we won this game 128 to 123. I called that game at the time controlled chaos, I think I called it, because it was a controlled game where both teams for a little bit tried to manage the lead, but it was chaos in the sense of it was really high scoring, and it's always been like that with the Atlanta Hawks, and it just kind of throws you off a little bit because all of last week we talked about how good our defensive work was and how strong it was and how intense it was and how we did some incredible things on that end. And then you see this game against Atlanta and it just throws you off because it's just always so high scoring, and defense feels like the second liability, if you know what I mean. It's the second option in your mind when you're thinking of a game with the Atlanta Hawks. But we walked away with a victory. We ended up having the big buckets in the end. We defended home court, and we just brought an exciting game for the fans to enjoy there, and that was beautiful to see. The next game was against the Sacramento Kings, and we won this one 126 to 113. Again, we talked about how experienced the Sacramento Kings are. You know, they got Russell Westbrook, they got Zach LaVine, they got DeMar DeRozan, they got Dennis Schroeder, they got Domantas Sabonis. They got a lot of really, really strong, capable veterans. And I said in that video as well, if you brought the Sacramento Kings team out to the Eastern Conference, they would be fighting for playoffs. The reason why they're not fighting for the playoffs at the moment, and they probably won't fight for the playoffs this season, is because they're in a ridiculously hard Western Conference. The East is not that strong. And I think a team like the Kings would actually thrive in the Eastern Conference. So that wasn't an easy team to beat, is what I'm trying to say. But we look like the veteran team. We look like the team with the experience. We look like the team that could manage a game out. We looked like the team that was properly coached, and we looked like the team that just were better at that time. And maybe we are just better than the Sacramento Kings, but it's nice to get that establishment against some former guys that dedicated a lot of time here. It's good to know from that win alone and that performance alone that we are heading in the right direction. And that is the beautiful thing about beating the Kings in Chicago, with both Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan playing. Love them. So happy that they found a home in Sacramento, and I'm very, very happy with the reception they received in Chicago, but it is nice to know we are heading in that right direction. And then the big game that everybody wanted to see, the NBA Cup, a lot of people were fearful because the NBA Cup games are must-win games. I want to win the NBA Cup. You know, as a fan, I want the Bulls to win as much things as possible. I don't care if it's an in-season tournament or the NBA championship. I want to win those sort of games. I want to be in those situations where it's win or go home. And the Bulls need that experience. So in a game like this against a team like the Knicks, you need to absolutely play your A game. And oh my goodness, did we play a hell of a game here. We won this one 135 to 125. And it was a game where, again, you could arguably say controlled chaos, but I'd make the assumption that this was just a game where we played better than the Knicks. We kind of dominated that game. We won in double figures, and we had the lead pretty much all game. And that is something that we could talk about in the next game as well on the bad side for the Bulls. But in this specific game, we walked out with the right energy, the right mindset. We beat up a Knicks team that probably was a little bit tired, a little bit worse for wear. We got the job done, and we won our NBA Cup game. And I'd rather have the NBA Cup game than the game in New York. That's how I personally feel, at least. Of course, I'd like to win them both, but that is hard to do. So I think we won the more important game, and that is beautiful. And with that being said, we did lose to the Knicks the second time around, 128 to 116. Pretty much what I said for that game for the Bulls, you can implement for the Knicks here. They came in with more energy. They came in with a better mindset, and they beat up on a Bulls team that looked a little bit worse for wear, a little bit stagnant, lacked the intensity kind of. Free throw discrepancy as well was a big issue in that game. And the Knicks were just red hot from the very beginning, and we really didn't have much of a chance against them in that game. I'm excited to see what the third game against both of our teams will look like. But yeah, kind of ended in a stalemate, I would say. Both teams looking dominant in their home turf, and both teams walked away with victories. I mean, a stalemate. I think I would have taken that at the beginning of the season. So we have 4 awards that we could give out. The Defensive Player of the Week, the Sixth Man of the Week, the Must Improve of the Week, and the Player of the Week in general. This is very difficult to give, considering, once again, we kind of started the week undefeated and we ended it on 1 loss. We're 5-1 at the moment. I mean, how could I honestly sit here and give you must improves on a team that's orchestrated to play really great team basketball, and they all seem to chip in one way, form, or fashion? The player I am going to give the must improve to, this will be a very controversial take, but I feel like it's the only player I can give it to. It's going to be Isaac Okoro. I know he's had a couple of offensive games now where it's not, I guess, one-sided. It's just his defense and no offense. But there were a couple of games where I still feel like he needs to start making his threes and making them more consistently. You know, I don't know his percentages from last season. I think it was around 35% from 3. I don't know. From what we've been seeing, it just feels a little bit worse than that, to be honest. There was a game where he had 14 points. But yeah, I just think offensively, we can see a little bit more from Isaac Okoro. And we don't really know the return date of Kobe White. Apparently, he got reassessed, and we still don't really have a timetable on his return. I don't know what's happening there, and it's very devastating to see. But while Kobe White is out, we need players to step up offensively, and Isaac Okoro has to be one of them. He needs to make open shots. He needs to be able to cut to the lane and you know, be attacking in that way. Otherwise, we kind of are playing 4v5 on offense from time to time. So I'll say that, but that would be a very questionable must improve, because I think everybody had a solid game here and there throughout the week. Isaac Okoro would be one of them as well. My 6th man of the week is Ayo Dosunmu. You might be asking, how did I come to this conclusion based on the fact that he missed the game? The game that he missed, we lost. That's how I've come to the conclusion. Not to mention he was pretty phenomenal throughout the week. But he's basically said his role is to make sure there is no drop-off from the starters to the bench. His role is to basically play starters minutes and to play like he is a starter. Now, you watch that game against the Knicks and ask yourself the question, the game that we lost, was there a drop-off from the starters to the bench? I think we can be honest. Our bench played well in that game against the Knicks. We scored over 30 points as a bench unit. That's impressive still. But there was a drop-off. And I think you have to give credit to Ayo, because you kind of saw what it was like without him there. We desperately missed him in that game. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you if we had Ayo, we would have won. I don't think you're going to be able to stop any team that's going to shoot 60% from three for 3 out of the 4 quarters of the game. It's unbelievable work rate and unbelievable shots taking and making ability from the Knicks. That's how they won the game. And I'm going to give them the respect over our weaknesses. I'd rather give them the respect because they played a hell of a game. But with Ayo there, I think it would have been a little bit more of an interesting game, maybe a little bit more back and forth. So that's how I feel. And I think he's my 6th man of the week. And defensive player of the week. This is always the one that comes to my mind. It's so difficult to give an answer to this. Like, defensively, we were just so good. Everyone was just, as a collective unit, so good. There were a couple of games where I thought we disappointed. The game against Atlanta, we allowed the Atlanta Hawks to drop 120. The Knicks in the second game, we allowed them to drop 120 on us. This is a difficult one. If I had to give a defensive player of the week, my gut is telling me Patrick Williams. My gut is telling me Patrick Williams. And I think I'm going to stick with that. I want to give a shout out, though, to Nikola Vucevic. He had a great defensive week. I feel like with Vucevic, there were just a couple of situations where the paint was open and teams took advantage of it. But he had a great defensive game against the Knicks in that first game. He had a very good defensive game against the Kings as well in the end. And he had a good defensive game against the Hawks. I think the Hawks was one of his best defensive... You know what? I'm changing my mind. Nikola Vucevic, defensive player of the week. Round of applause for Nikola Vucevic. I think I'm a bit biased, man. I think I just look at defensive players and I easily just want to give it to them because it's just the easy choice. But Vucevic had a heck of a defensive week. I'm changing my mind. Nikola Vucevic is my defensive player of the week. When an offensive player known for their offense and known for being a really bad defender comes in and puts the shift that he put in, I feel like it's something I should not ignore. But shout out to Pat. Shout out to the rest of the team. Guys like Okoro had good defensive displays. Bazelis was in and around there as well. He had good defensive displays. Trey Jones came in, had a couple of great steals nights as well. And he was being a nuisance on the defensive ends. Josh Giddey didn't do terribly bad defensively either. We had a really solid defensive week. It could be better though. You know, we allowed the Knicks to drop 128. We allowed Atlanta to drop 123. So it wasn't perfect. But some nights, teams are going to come in scorching. But we do need to get back to what works. And we need to get back to that intensity on the defensive end. That Philly game, we're versing a team that's red hot in that Philly game coming up. But we're also versing a team that has a little bit of experience, but also has some inexperience there. I think there is a chance to attack this Philly team if you bring that defensive intensity to that game. But we'll see. Time will tell. I don't know. Maybe I'm just... over exaggerating, and maybe no matter what we do, we're not going to beat Philly. I don't know. We'll see. But my player of the week is Josh Giddey. I mean, unbelievable offense from Josh Giddey this entire week. Unbelievable offense. High IQ. He allowed sometimes in that fourth quarter for Ayo to finish the game properly and be the one to make the decisions because he has the red hot hand. There were other nights where he dropped triple doubles. Then the game against the Knicks the first time around, he had close to a triple double and no turnovers. Offensively, he was just an unbelievable sight to see, and he was averaging all-star numbers. So fair play to Josh Giddey. He was fantastic. He led to a lot of the Bulls' success this week, and let's hope it continues. So, how many games do we have to look forward to this week, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I'll tell you what, it looks like we have 3 games to look forward to this week, with the first one coming pretty much in a couple of hours' time, and it's going to be against the Philadelphia 76ers at home. A massive game. I think both teams are 5-1, so a very similar record. Philly's rookie is unbelievable. Maxi's playing really, really well. Joel Embiid is getting back into form. I'm assuming they're all going to be ready for this game against the Bulls, and we got to be prepared for that. We don't usually beat Philadelphia, especially with Joel Embiid in the lineup, but it's not even Joel Embiid now that you got to fear. Maxi has been unbelievable this year. So there's a lot to look forward to against that Philadelphia team. But I don't believe they're invincible, and neither are the Bulls. So I could truly see this being a close and competitive game throughout. And especially at home, your goal is always to defend home turf. So you got to come out with the right energy and mindset. If we can do that, I'd give us a chance to win that game. And then we got a game in the NBA Cup against the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, I already told you the importance of the NBA Cup and the importance of winning that game. I want to be a part of the NBA Cup. I want to qualify in the NBA Cup. I want to be that team that could go to Vegas, you know? Let's all go to Vegas, bro. What happens if Vegas stays in Vegas? Let's just make it to Vegas. That's what I want to see. And in order to do that, you have to face the second seeded Milwaukee Bucks, who have beaten us in the preseason, by the way, have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's always a thorn in our side, Miles Turner, who produced a great game against us in preseason, and a bench mob that played really, really well. I can't tell you we're going to beat the Milwaukee Bucks. Well, what I can tell you is, with the right energy, the right mindset, the right attitude, we can give them a game. And whatever happens, happens. But we need to give them a game. We need to be close in the game to win a game. And that's how I feel with the Milwaukee Bucks. I give us a chance to win that one too. And then we got a back-to-back. Our first back-to-back of the season is against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, Cleveland, in my opinion, if there are any teams that have disappointed me in the beginning of the season, Cleveland is up there as one of them. Because we all see them as the best team in the East, one of the best teams in the East. And I just don't think they've delivered to that standard. It could always change. It's the beginning of the season. Let's hope it doesn't change against the Chicago Bulls. We did beat them in preseason. Let's hope we have their number. Let's hope we are their bogey team. And let's hope that we can win that game as well. I'm going to predict, because we have 3 games, I'm going to stick with the positivity vibes. I'm going to pick 2-1. Do you guys agree? Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned for more. Take care, and peace.